Welcome back to another live stream. I see that YouTube Studio has actually updated its live streams and now allows you to share your screen. So I think I'll be sticking with live streaming straight through YouTube. It seems to be the lighter version of live streaming. Now, just before we get into today's conversation about um, continuing our conversation about societies without agriculture, while we're waiting for people to come online, I'll quickly finish that thought I had when the heat problem in my sauna so rudely interrupted me. What I was going to say is that since Tolkien, fantasy has been very much about the conservation of society. Whereas science fiction has very much been about advancing society, about seeing what's new. And it would be very interesting to set up a post-apocalyptic world that is more fantastical, but where scientists are the solution rather than the problem. I think that would be an interesting thematic element to play with. Just from a subversion of the normal expectations kind of trope. Everybody expects scientists to be the bad guys. Okay, so that was more or less my thought there when I was interrupted. Let me know in the chats what you guys think of those vertical live streams. YouTube has been pushing them and saying, please do them and whatnot. Hello, Christian. Good to see you. And so I tried them out. They seem to have some good performances. So I might do a couple more when I have ideas, or I might hive it off to like a new channel. I don't know. Let me know. You guys are my streaming buddies. Let me know what you think. Okay. So let's get started with this conversation about non-agricultural civilizations. So in the last live stream, we discussed pre the agricultural revolution civilizations or civilizations that just never went through the agricultural revolution, right? So these are civilizations like the San people in Africa who just remained hunter-gatherers. And they have a very, very different society that is based far less around owning stuff and far more about living in unity with the land. But there are other ways to have non-agricultural societies. So one is to go out the far side and to simply not have agricultural needs anymore. And we'll get to that in the second half of the stream. In the first half of the stream, I want to just talk about the potential for nomadic civilizations. So the thing with nomadic civilizations is they are not agricultural. Okay, this is still an agricultural civilization quite often, but they are not pastoral. Okay, so it is still, however, a fairly unique take on civilizations for us as people to look at. We tend not to be in, there aren't that many nomadic peoples left in our world. So most of us tend to think in terms of stability and a home and so on. We don't tend to think about traveling. But there were peoples in our past, the Scythians, the Mongols, and there are semi-nomadic people left now, the Sami, who live in the northern part of Finland, are a semi-nomadic people. They during some of the year they travel with the reindeer herds, and then in winter they stay home. So what changes in such a culture is obviously you are very, very, very invested in the nomad part of that civilization, normally in the animals that you either follow or that you use as transportation. If you think of the Scythians and the Mongols, they were super invested in their horses. The nomadic tribes of the desert are super invested in camels. The Sami are super invested in reindeer. And their lives revolve around these animals. And that is simply because of the nature of the civilization built on these nomadic wanderings. So, if you're going to set up a nomadic organization, first you should check out my video on the topic because I did do a video on the topic. But you also need to think about things like, where is their economic value from? If they're nomadic people, they still need to generate some kind of economic value. Do they sell their domesticated animals? Do they sell transportation costs? What is it that they do in order to generate wealth, in order to generate value? So consider those aspects. And then the other thing to think about is, how is their society organized? So I've actually just finished recording and editing the podcast episode of the World Building Blueprints. And it's all about societal organization and kind of ranking and so on. So it is top of mind for me for the moment at the moment. But it is a very important aspect of any given society. And in a nomadic society where you have resources that need to be distributed around a people who move around a people who maybe live in houses that are on wheels, or that move from place to place, you don't have fixed shelter, and you maybe need to look after the children differently and so on. Who makes the decisions around where resources go? Because that is really what societal organization is about. It's about deciding where the resources of society go. Now, in our world today, we say that, capitalism, or the market decides where resources go. But that's true and not true. I mean, we still distribute resources beyond the market, um, for obvious reasons. You need society to function, and sometimes that means making the decision to distribute resources differently from what you have. So, in a nomadic organization, what is that? What does that look like in a nomadic culture? What does that resource distribution decision look like? So yeah, those are things that are worth thinking about in a nomadic organization. But what I really want to get to today is the post-agricultural societies. So hello, Mieth. Good to see you again. Um, so a post-agricultural society is one that literally has gone beyond agriculture. Hello, Smoky Dementia. Good to see you again too. So in this case, it is a society that started with agriculture. They had agriculture. Then, through scientific or magical advancement or whatever, they no longer require they no longer require agriculture. So an obvious example is obviously Star Trek, who invent the replicator that basically converts energy into anything that you want it to be. And that completely frees the society from the need to have any kind of agriculture. Your food is literally just, you feed in energy in at the one end, and it spits out um, food at the other end. And of course, you have access to a lot of energy because you're a spacefaring civilization. So all of the stars are potential energy sources. You can mine the asteroids for oil if you're still on the fossil fuel burning energy. So you've got access to a lot of energy. And that would absolutely free you from it. But you can also look towards things like, hello, Shakar Brown, good to see you. You could also look towards something like magic, right? If I think of, you know, one of the things that continually get to me is D&D spells. I swear, I know I shouldn't pick on it. D&D is not there to be a viable economy. I know that for a fact. But still, those spells that create food, the hero's feast, and the create clean water, and all of those things, I'm like, if you have that, why do you have any form of starvation ever? Why are you still tied to agriculture? Why do you have peasants? It drives me nuts. Anyway, so but you could look towards magic to create food or even just to massively increase the yield or automate farming. Automating farming is another way to kind of free yourself from a lot of agricultural requirements, although it will not as fully put you in a post-resource society as something like the replicator. And the reason for that is, let's say you fully automate farming. You have golems as your farm hands, and you don't need people on farms at all anymore. You still need the farm land. And even if you solve the ownership problem, the fact that the farmland is being used as farmland means it's not being used as, say, housing or entertainment or anything else like that. So there is still a cost associated with using the land for farming. So automation will get you part of the way to a post-agricultural society, but it won't get you all of the way. All of the way will require something like the replicator device. Okay. But, if you have, smoky dementia mentioned in there, a farm planet they feed because it's just a city, yes. So if you break free of a single planet and you have multiple planets, right? And you then have completely automated farming, it is entirely possible that that would break you free of of an agricultural civilization. It would put you into post-agricultural because land at that point is no longer a limited resource because you have moved beyond the requirement of land and you can now automate a whole planet being that. And yeah, Christian, Warhammer 40K absolutely has that. They have the big hive cities that are basically nothing but cities and manufactorums, which is factories. And then they have the farming planets that's nothing but farming and planting and so on. And they move the resources around between them, usually by means of using rogue traders who are awesome, awesome. I love the lore around rogue traders. I just think they're amazing. I love it. Um, okay, so let's say that you have somehow entered this post-agricultural societies. Okay, you are at the point where you no longer need farming, farmhands, or anything like that. You can produce the basic needs of your population without requiring agriculture. What changes? Okay, so this is a very interesting question. Um, Marinan says, I don't know if it's been discussed yet, but I'm very curious. Would fish farming count as no farms? So, in my opinion, fish farming would still be farming in terms of you haven't yet freed yourself from the requirement to produce resources for food. But it is also not fully agriculture. So, uh, I don't know. It to me, it falls in that nomadic gray area. So you could potentially build a nomadic civilization that is nomadic on the ocean, which would really be a cool idea. Just let me just chase this rabbit hole before I return to fully post agriculture. So You could build a nomadic civilization that live on these massive boats, right? And they could farm fish in, in like nets that they drag with them, or they could anchor over places where fish farming is possible. They could farm a location for like a year or two and then up anchor and leave, letting that area recover and go and, put down their nets and farm in another part of the ocean. I think that such a civilization, such an ocean nomadic civilization, would be absolutely fascinating. It would also work well, really, really well, as a post-apocalyptic civilization, where you have had ocean rises to the point where you have minimal or perhaps no land available to you. So, if the Earth's oceans rise to like the level they were when the dinosaurs roamed, for example, you might have people who take to the oceans in this manner and become ocean nomads. And just for context, when the dinosaurs were around, there was no ice on the polar caps. So, I mean, it was, the water level was a lot higher than it is today. So in that case, you could very well have that, and I think that that would be a very interesting post or agriculture adjacent. Let's call it that, agriculture adjacent civilization. Okay, but back to post agriculture, like genuinely post agriculture. So the thing the thing about post agriculture, like really post agriculture, like Star Trek or the culture. Um, at that point, you end up with a civilization that has no need to work. Okay. Everybody's basic needs can be met. And that is a paradigm shift of note. Um, Fref says fossil fuels on asteroids. Well, I mean, yeah. There is, of course, the Expanse, which is based around mining the asteroid belt and so on. Great series. I said the TV show that they did for the Expanse, also fantastic. Loved it. All of it fantastic. Anyway, so about about these civilizations where you don't need to work. So I don't think that people will sit and do nothing. I don't think there'll be eternal couch potatoes. I think that they will, throw themselves into creative endeavors, maybe work for. There'll probably be some religions that jump up and people trying to convince others of various religions and so on. But I don't think that the lack of work will mean the civilization collapses. But that's a personal opinion. I mean, you could argue the other way. But I think what you do need to think about in the case where you move beyond agriculture, where everyone's needs is met, is what does your society first, before we get to what do they value, how are those resources distributed? Because if those resources are in the hands of a wealthy elite and they only distribute a limited amount to like the rest of us, it's gonna be about the same kind of society because those wealthy elite will demand some kind of recompense for that distribution from the rest of us. So we'll still be working. It'll just be working for the wealthy elite to get, the stuff they print, basically. But if your distribution is handled like, say, the culture, where there's these AI machines that basically make the distribution decision in a fairness concept. So everybody gets what they need at the very minimum, and then you can earn more through what you do for your society. I think that that would result in a society where people would work for the society. But obviously, to a lesser or greater extent, they would do things like in the culture, they serve as diplomats or they serve as agents of the culture and so on. And but obviously, they don't need to do that. They do that because they do love the culture itself. And then if you look at something like the quantum thief, it handles the distribution of resources. So everybody gets resources, but you only get resources for as long as you have time. And then when your time runs out, you are put in a robot body and you have to work for the society until you once again regain enough time to live your life. And that then handles that distribution decision. There is still a marketplace. You still buy the resources, but you don't buy it with money. You buy it with service to the civilization, with service to your culture. Which, I mean, it's basically still the concept is still there of you work and you get stuff, but everybody's basic needs are met. Nobody's starving, right? You work for the extra stuff. Okay. Um, then I think your next biggest decision with post-agricultural societies will be, where is value generated? Now, I did make a video on that when I will put a card somewhere around here when I'm done with the stream. But basically, your value is no longer dependent on what people need to live, right? Because any stuff that you want is immediately available. In Star Trek, you can just print it. In the culture, you can get it. You can get food, you can get shelter, all of that's just right there. So if all of those needs are met, what is left for value? Okay. So in the quantum thief, that becomes time. In Star Trek, oh, they don't really address that question. But in the culture, which is really interesting, it is experiences, right? So in the culture book, they value experiences. They want to experience new things. They want to go to planets that are new. They're also a fairly hedonistic society. There are even the droids, the robots do the devil's tango, and pleasure centers in their brains light up. And that is, I think, also a very legit take on it. I think that pleasure and experiences will become the highest value of currency. Now, all of that being said, I will also say the culture is this massively distributed civilization. So they have like these ships and they have space stations and all of these, like they're a very distributed civilization, right? Most of them live on ships, spaceships. And sometimes there will be a shortage within the culture. So, one specific ship will experience some kind of technical difficulties and there'll be a shortage of water or food or whatever. At that point in that ship, there will temporarily suddenly be a market with something used as currency in order to distribute the resources that have suddenly become limited again. And I think that that is a very interesting question to address if you're creating a post-agricultural civilization is, what happens if there's suddenly a shortage? Do you have a market spring up? Do people work together? Do they once again fall back into the, okay, I have a water and you have a sandwich, and how do we trade for this? And do they suddenly get a currency again? Because of course many of these societies, go currencyless. So it's worth thinking about, um, like what happens in the case of a shortage. And then I also think that what is often overlooked, but I think it's overlooked because mostly when we hit post-agricultural societies in fiction, right? They're fully set up, they're fully formed. They are already post-agricultural, they have been for centuries. But what if Your post-agricultural society is just getting started, okay? What happens when people protest and you have these questions of work and not work? What happens when you have a generation that is used to working and now suddenly there's no need because there's this device that solves all these problems? Do they do they look at the younger generation? And I mean, of course, every older generation looks at the younger generation and says, "You won't amount to anything." It's the nature of humanity. But would that happen even more so if a post-agricultural society is just getting started? Right? So you've just discovered the device. That changeover point is so full of conflict. It's got such great potential for telling an incredible story because you've got a society that's in immense flux. You're making a change from you have to work to eat to you can just live. You can just live. No one needs to work to eat. No one has to labor on a farm. We don't even have to have robots on a farm. It's post agricultural. And I think that that is a fascinating, fascinating change point in a society. I think that you would have, yes, I think you would have Luddites farming, as Smoke Dementia says. I think you would potentially have protests of people saying, no, the human way is better. I think you would also perhaps have value in unique handcrafted items, right? Because you now have this machine that can mass produce everything. So the actual unique items that can be proven to have been produced by a human hand, I think would have the potential to hold immense value. But it is an interesting philosophical blah, blah, blah. I mispronounced that food. Um, it is an interesting philosophical question to consider that changeover point because it is even greater than, say, the introduction of the automated spinning, which is where we get the term Luddite from, right? I think it's either spinning or weaving. I cannot recollect which one now, but spinning or weaving is where we get the term Luddite from. And this would be an even bigger change than that, and it would be a fascinating one to explore in fiction. Smoke Dementia says real food is better in Star Trek. Yep, that is true. We saw that in the Picard Star Trek as well, where he was growing tomatoes and living on the little farm. It was very cute. Um, Fref says the Expanse really was. What do I think of the civilization in backrooms? I actually don't know the civilization in backrooms, so I'm gonna have to go take a look at that to give you my opinion, Fresh. But I'll tell you what I loved about the Expanse and their currency, and I do talk about this in my upcoming video on currencies. But that they used poker chips as a currency was so, so cool because with that currency, what that currency did for them is it gave them a ability to use something as currency that cannot be traced, right? Because you can't trace where a poker chip comes from, and you know what its value is because you can always walk into a casino and get that value for it. So that makes it an almost perfect black market currency. And the belters are all about the black market currency because their actual currency, the money that they're paid, is company script, which comes with a lot of problems. Company script creates a situation where you tie people to a company. They can't spend their money outside of the company store. So basically, the company exercises enormous control. And by using the poker chips, the Belters went around that problem, which is extremely innovative and a really, really great use of currency. I loved it. Um, Smoke Dementia says wool trimmers after it woven filling. I'm not entirely sure. Fresh says really was great. My bad. There's a hard limit on word. Yes, yes. The Expanse was fantastic. I highly encourage The Expanse and Killjoys were the two science fiction series out of the recent set of TV series that I really, really, really enjoyed. Um, so I can recommend those two. Um, and then I guess the last point to consider with your post agricultural society is your currency. Would you have any kind of currency? But, you know, with currency, it might even happen before you go fully post agricultural because currency is a complicated beast, right? So you have to understand that currency is a implementation of money. So, and money is basically just a counting system, right? So, money is just a way for us to be able to take an apple and give it to somebody else and get the oranges we need to survive. But currency is the implementation of money from organizations we trust. And the problem is that currency has created this market that has no value. There is nothing on the face of this planet that irritates me as much as the currency market. Literally nothing. People are selling an imaginary counting number for another imaginary counting number and somehow making more of the imaginary counting number. And where is the value? Where is the value that they are adding to the economic landscape? Nobody's GDP is increased by this. Nobody's, there are no more goods, there are no more services, nobody's life is made better. It's literally just trading one number for another. It is ridiculous and I hate it. And I will now stop ranting about it. I can rant for a long, long time about currency. But I do think that you might lose currency earlier rather than later. I think you might lose it before you get to the post agricultural point. Because currency, as I say, is this counter, and it's a counter that is getting unwieldy already in our civilizations. And I think that once you hit a certain point of production and of automation, that currency will become less and less of value. And I think you will start moving more towards a sort of globalized concept of money. Maybe, maybe. Look, I could be very wrong. Like the good Lord knows, I do not have an accurate crystal ball. I can't peer into the future. And anyway, this is not exactly my speciality as a channel. Um, so yeah. Um, I think that more or less covers our societies that don't have agriculture. So we've spoken about the Sand people and their lack of agriculture, that people who never went through an agricultural revolution and the kind of remaining at the hunter-gatherer civilization. Bear in mind that such a civilization wouldn't have to be, technologically stone age or whatever. You could still make a lot of the discoveries that we made through agriculture. You would just need to think about how those discoveries would come about in a hunter-gatherer society. And then, of course, there is the replacing agriculture with magic. So you can have druids who, you know, make the wild lands yield enough food that you never need to go into agriculture. And um, and then you could go with nomadic, either post-apocalyptic or hunter-gatherer style, as opposed to pastoral civilizations. And they can either, follow the animals the way that the Sami do, or the way that the Scythians did, and so on. Or you could go with like an ocean-going nomadic civilization. And then, of course, you can go out the other end where you no longer need agriculture because your technology has advanced to that point. Um, Fref says there's loads of dangerous creatures that kill and just overall dangers that don't follow any logic. Fref, I will take a look at the back rooms and see what I think about it. Um, and other than that, this has been a fun live stream. It has been really interesting to look into this economic aspect. I did study economics at university, but that was donkey years ago. So it's been an interesting ride delving economics like this. And then let me know what you think of the Sauna Thoughts live streams. And otherwise, I will see you next month for another live stream. It has been a really fun time, and I hope that you have enjoyed it as well. Cheers, guys. Have a great Saturday and Sunday.